The rain started just after sunset. At first, it was nothing more than a light drizzle against my windshield. By the time I reached the highway, it had become a wall of water. I could barely see the road. My headlights disappeared into the darkness, and every few seconds, lightning flashed across the sky, turning the world white for a split second before throwing it back into blackness. I should have turned around. I should have called my father. Instead, I kept driving. Maybe because I was still angry. Maybe because going home meant another argument. Or maybe because some part of me already knew that if I went back that night, I would have to hear the same words again. You're wasting your time. You need to think about your future. You can't keep living like this, Nova. My father's voice kept repeating in my head. I'd heard it so many times that night that it almost sounded like the rain. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I know what I'm doing, I muttered to myself. But the truth was, I didn't. I was 25 years old and I had never felt more lost. My father thought I needed direction. I thought I needed space. Neither of us knew how to say that without turning it into another fight. Then my car made a strange sound. I frowned. No. The engine coughed. The dashboard flickered. I pressed the accelerator. Nothing. Come on. The car slowed. I pulled onto the side of the road just as the engine died completely. I sat there in silence. Rain hammered the roof. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. I looked at my phone. 3% battery. I stared at the screen for several seconds. My father was the obvious person to call. But I couldn't. Not after the argument. Not when the last thing he'd said to me was that I needed to grow up. So I scrolled through my contacts. There were plenty of names. Friends. Co-workers. People I could probably call. But my thumb stopped on one name. Daniel Hayes. I hadn't called him in months. Not because we weren't close. Because somehow, lately, being around him had started to feel different. Daniel was my father's best friend. He'd known me since I was 17. He had helped me through college. He had shown up when my father couldn't. He had always been the calm one. The dependable one. The person everyone trusted. I stared at his name. Then I pressed call. He answered almost immediately. Nova? His voice was deep and familiar. I closed my eyes. My car broke down. There was a short silence. Where are you? I gave him the location. I'll come get you. You don't have to. I wasn't asking. Despite everything, I smiled. Okay. Stay inside the car. I'll be there. 25 minutes later, headlights appeared through the rain. Daniel pulled over behind me. He stepped out holding an umbrella and walked toward my car. Even through the rain, I recognized that expression. Worried. Slightly annoyed. Protective. He opened my door. You could have called sooner. I didn't want to bother you. His eyes softened. You never bother me. I looked away. For some reason, those words hit harder than they should have. He took my bag from the passenger seat. Come on. Where? My house. I can get a hotel. In this weather? I'll figure something out. You'll stay with me. I looked at him. Daniel's expression was calm. Certain. You can have the guest room. I hesitated. Then nodded. Okay. The drive to his house was quiet. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Daniel kept one hand on the steering wheel while the windshield wipers struggled against the rain. I watched the streets pass outside. You and your father argued? I looked at him. How did you know? You only call me when something is wrong. I smiled faintly. That's not true. It is. Maybe I just missed you. He glanced at me. The smallest smile appeared. Maybe. We reached his house around 11. The moment I stepped inside, warmth surrounded me. Daniel took my wet jacket. Bathrooms down the hall. There's a clean shirt on the bed. You keep clothes for stranded people? No. Then whose shirt is it? Mine. I looked at him. I'm supposed to wear your shirt? Unless you'd rather sleep in wet clothes. I laughed. Fine. He disappeared into the kitchen. A few minutes later, I was sitting at his counter wearing one of his shirts, drinking coffee while rain battered the windows. Daniel placed a plate in front of me. Eat. I'm not hungry. Nova. I sighed. You're still bossy. Someone has to be. I took a bite. He watched until I took another. Then he finally seemed satisfied. We talked. About my father. About my work. About the future. At some point, I realized I had stopped being angry. I was just tired. I don't know what I'm doing with my life, I admitted. Daniel leaned against the counter. You don't have to know tonight. What if I never figure it out? You will. How can you be so sure? Because you're 25. He smiled. You have more time than you think. I looked down at my coffee. Sometimes I wish my dad understood that. Your father loves you. I know. He just doesn't always know how to show it. I looked at Daniel. You understand me better than he does. His expression changed for the briefest moment. Then he looked away. Get some sleep. He walked me to the guest room. I stood in the doorway. Daniel? Yeah. Thanks. He looked at me. For what? For tonight. His voice softened. Always Nova? He turned away. I closed the door. And somehow, lying in his guest room wearing his shirt, I couldn't stop thinking about those two words. Always Nova. I eventually fell asleep. But sometime after midnight I woke up. The house was completely silent. I sat up. For a moment I didn't know where I was. Then I remembered. Daniel's house. I stepped into the hallway. The lights were off. Rain still whispered against the windows. I walked toward the living room and stopped near the large window. I stood there with my back to the hallway looking out at the storm. Then I heard footsteps. Slow. Careful. I didn't turn around. I felt someone stop behind me. Before I could say anything, Daniel's arms gently wrapped around my waist from behind. My entire body went still. His chest was against my back. His breath touched the side of my neck. Daniel? He didn't answer. For several seconds, there was only the sound of rain. Then I felt his arms tighten slightly. His voice came out barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I swallowed. Why? He lowered his head. Because I've spent a long time trying to convince myself that this wasn't real. I turned my head slightly. What isn't real? He closed his eyes. And when he finally spoke, his voice was full of everything he'd been trying to hide. Nova. I can't stop myself anymore. I stopped breathing. Neither of us moved. Then, slowly Daniel loosened his arms. He gave me the chance to step away. I didn't. Instead, I whispered, then don't. And for the first time, Daniel looked at me like he wasn't my father's best friend. He looked at me like I was the man he'd been afraid to love. I didn't sleep after that. Not really. I stayed standing there in the dim hallway, my back still warm from where Daniel's arms had been around me. My heart was beating so hard that I could hear it. Daniel had moved away. He was standing a few feet from me, staring at the floor. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, he whispered, You should go back to bed. I looked at him. Do you mean that? He slowly raised his eyes. No. That single word changed the air between us. I took one step closer. Then what do you mean? Daniel exhaled. I mean that I don't trust myself right now. My chest tightened. Why? His eyes moved over my face. Because I've spent years telling myself that what I feel is impossible. He paused. And tonight, standing behind you. His voice became quieter. I realized I couldn't keep lying to myself. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to ask him 100 questions. Another part was afraid of what the answers might mean. So I asked the simplest one. When did this start? Daniel looked away. I don't know. You do. He gave a sad smile. Maybe I do. The rain continued against the windows. I noticed you had changed, he finally said. When? A long time ago. I swallowed. I was 18? No. His answer came immediately. Not then. He looked at me seriously. It was later. When you were already an adult. When you started making your own choices. When you stopped looking at everyone else for permission to be yourself. I stared at him. You noticed all that? I noticed everything. The words sent a strange warmth through me. Then Daniel stepped back. But noticing doesn't mean I was going to act on it. Why not? You're my best friend's son. I looked down. And that means something. His voice was firm. I've known your father for most of my life. I've been part of your family for years. I wasn't going to let my feelings destroy that. I understood. But understanding didn't make the ache disappear. What if I don't want you to keep fighting them? Daniel went completely still. He looked at me for several seconds. Then he said something that I would remember for the rest of my life. Then you need to be absolutely sure. I frowned. Sure of what? That this is what you want. I stepped closer. I am. You're tired. I know. You've had a fight with your father. I know. You're emotional. I nodded. But this isn't the first time I've thought about you. Daniel's expression softened. I continued. I've tried not to. His breathing changed. I told myself it was stupid. Nova. I told myself you were too old. He looked away. I told myself you were my father's best friend. Pause. And then I realized none of those things changed how I felt. Daniel closed his eyes. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then he walked toward me. Slowly. Carefully. He stopped close enough that I could feel his warmth. "Tell me to leave," he whispered. I shook my head. "Tell me you're uncomfortable." "I'm not." "Tell me you want me to stop." "I don't." His eyes searched mine. Then he reached up and gently touched my cheek. His hand was warm. Steady. Nothing like the nervousness I could hear in his voice. "You're sure?" "Yes." He nodded. But instead of kissing me, he lowered his hand. "Then we'll talk in the morning." I couldn't help smiling. "You're really going to make me wait?" A quiet laugh escaped him. "I'm trying to do this right. For once." He smiled. "For once." He turned toward his room. Then stopped. Without looking back, he said, "Good night, Nova." "Good night, Daniel." He disappeared down the hallway. I returned to the guest room. But this time when I closed the door, I smiled. Because for the first time, I knew I wasn't imagining the connection between us. Morning came far too quickly. I woke to the smell of coffee. For a few seconds I forgot where I was. Then everything came rushing back. The hallway. Daniel's arms around me. His confession. I got dressed and walked into the kitchen. Daniel was standing at the counter. He looked at me. "Morning." "Morning." It was almost painfully normal. He handed me a cup. "You sleep okay?" "Not really." "Me neither." Our eyes met. And for the first time we both smiled. Then Daniel said, "The roads are still bad." I raised an eyebrow. "You're keeping me here on purpose." He laughed softly. "Maybe." I leaned against the counter. "Good." Daniel looked at me. And in that moment, neither of us needed to say anything else. The storm had kept me in his house. But something far more dangerous was keeping me close to him now. A feeling neither of us could pretend wasn't there anymore. The storm finally ended that afternoon. For the first time in 2 days, sunlight came through Daniel's windows. I stood in the kitchen watching golden light spread across the floor and realized something strange. I didn't want to leave. That thought frightened me more than anything that had happened the night before. This was supposed to be temporary. My car would be repaired. I'd go home. Things would return to normal. Except I already knew they wouldn't. Not after what Daniel had told me. Not after the way I had felt when his arms were around me. And definitely not after the way he'd looked at me that morning. Daniel walked into the kitchen carrying a box. Mechanic called. My heart dropped. What did he say? "They're still working on your car." "How long?" "Probably another day." I couldn't stop the smile that appeared on my face. Daniel noticed. "You're happy about that?" "Maybe." He shook his head. "You're getting too comfortable." "Maybe I like being here." He stopped. For a moment we simply looked at each other. Then he smiled. "I like having you here too." It was such a simple sentence. But coming from Daniel it felt enormous. That afternoon we decided to cook dinner together. Daniel insisted he knew what he was doing. I disagreed. "You've been holding that knife wrong for 5 minutes." "I know how to hold a knife." "You're holding it like you're afraid of it." He laughed. "You're very confident for someone who burned toast yesterday." "That was one time. It was charcoal. It was slightly overcooked." He laughed again. I had never seen him laugh so much. And I realized I wanted to be the reason for that smile. Not just once. Every day. The thought stayed with me as we cooked. At one point I reached across him for a spice. My arm brushed against his. We both stopped. It was such a tiny touch. Barely anything. But Daniel's eyes met mine. Neither of us moved. Then he slowly stepped aside. "You're doing that on purpose." I smiled. "Doing what?" "Getting too close." "Maybe you should move." "I could. But you won't." His smile disappeared. "No." The word came quietly. My heart began racing. Daniel looked down at the counter. I told myself I'd keep some distance. "Why?" "Because every time you get close I forget why I should." I swallowed. "Maybe you don't need to remember." He looked at me. "Don't make this easy for me." I smiled softly. "I don't think it's supposed to be easy." That evening we ate dinner on the back porch. The sun had disappeared, leaving the sky purple and gold. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "You know what I never expected?" "What?" "To enjoy this." "This?" "Having you here." I smiled. "I've enjoyed it too." He studied me. "You're different here." "How?" "Relaxed." "I am." "You don't seem to care what anyone thinks." I looked toward the horizon. Maybe because you don't make me feel like I have to explain myself. Daniel didn't answer. He simply reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. My breath caught. His thumb moved gently across my knuckles. "This is dangerous," he whispered. I looked at our hands. "Why?" "Because it feels normal." I smiled. "Maybe that's what scares you." He looked at me. "Yes." We stayed like that for several minutes. No dramatic words. No promises. Just his hand over mine. For the first time, I understood that romance wasn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it was simply being touched by someone who had spent years trying not to touch you at all. Later that night, we watched an old movie in the living room. I sat at one end of the couch. Daniel sat at the other. At least for the first 20 minutes. Then I moved closer. He glanced at me. "You're invading my space." "You have plenty of space." He smiled. I moved closer again. "Nova." "What?" "You're impossible." "I've heard that." He shook his head. But he didn't move away. Eventually my shoulder touched his. Then our arms. Neither of us said anything. The movie continued. I couldn't tell you what it was about. I only remember the warmth of his shoulder against mine. And the way Daniel finally relaxed beside me. After the movie ended, I turned toward him. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you come after me that night?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" "When my car broke down." He thought for a moment. "You needed help." "No." I shook my head. "That isn't the whole reason." Daniel looked at me. Then he sighed. "Because when I saw your name on my phone." He paused. "I didn't think." "What did you think?" "That you needed me." My heart tightened. He continued. "And I realized I would have driven through anything to get to you." Silence filled the room. I looked down. "Daniel?" "I know." "No, listen." I turned toward him. "That matters to me." His expression softened. "You matter to me too." "More than you should?" His eyes held mine. "More than I ever planned." I didn't know who moved first. Maybe both of us. We leaned toward each other until our foreheads touched. Daniel whispered, "You're sure?" "Yes." His fingers brushed my cheek. Then he kissed me. Slowly. Softly. There was no desperation in it. No urgency. Just a quiet confession neither of us needed to speak. When we separated, I smiled. Daniel looked almost stunned. "What?" I asked. He gave a tiny laugh. "I've imagined that for a long time." I felt my face warm. "How long?" "Long enough." I rested my head against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around me. And for several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then I whispered, "I'm scared." His arm tightened around me. "So am I." "What happens when I go home?" He looked down at me. "We figure it out." "And my father?" "We tell the truth when we're ready." "You really think this could work?" Daniel was quiet. Then he said, "I don't know." I looked at him. "But." He smiled sadly. "But I'd rather find out with you than spend the rest of my life wondering." My heart ached. I reached for his hand. His fingers locked with mine. Outside, the last drops of rain fell from the roof. Inside, I realized something had changed. This wasn't just a secret attraction anymore. I was falling for him. And judging by the way Daniel looked at me, he was falling too. I thought leaving Daniel's house would make everything easier. I was wrong. The moment I drove away, I felt like I'd left a part of myself behind. The road was finally dry. The clouds had cleared. Everything outside my windshield looked normal again. But nothing inside me was. I kept thinking about the night before. His hand in mine. His forehead against mine. The way he had kissed me like he was afraid the moment would disappear. And most of all, his words. "I'd rather find out with you than spend the rest of my life wondering." I replayed them over and over. When I reached home, my father was sitting in the living room. He looked up. "Your car okay?" "Almost." He nodded. Then his eyes narrowed slightly. "You stayed at Daniel's?" "Yes." "For 2 nights." "The roads were bad." "I know." He went quiet. I could feel his eyes following me as I walked toward my room. "Nova." I stopped. "Yeah. Everything okay?" I turned around. For one terrifying second I thought he knew. But he didn't. "Not yet." "Yeah." He nodded. "Good." I went into my room and closed the door. Then I leaned against it and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Did you get home safely?" I smiled immediately. I typed back, "Yes." 3 dots appeared. "Good." I stared at the word. Then another message arrived. "I miss you already." My heart jumped. I typed, "I miss you too." I put my phone down, then picked it up again. I read his message one more time. That was how it started. Not with secret meetings. Not with dramatic promises. Just messages. Small ones. "Good morning. Did you eat? How was your day? Sleep well." And slowly, without realizing it, Daniel became the first person I wanted to talk to every morning and the last person I wanted to hear from at night. We became careful. We didn't see each other around my father. We didn't hold hands where anyone could notice. We didn't take photographs together. But in private, everything felt different. Daniel wasn't the distant man everyone else knew. He was softer with me. He laughed more. He talked about things he'd never talked about before. One evening, I went to his house after work. He opened the door. The moment he saw me, his entire expression changed. "You're early. I wanted to see you." He smiled. "I wanted to see you too." I stepped inside. He closed the door behind me. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. Then he pulled me into a hug. I wrapped my arms around him. His voice was quiet against my hair. "I missed this." "What?" "Having you here." I smiled. "I missed it too." We spent the evening cooking dinner. Afterward, we sat on his couch talking about nothing. At some point, I rested my head against his shoulder. He didn't move. He just took my hand. I stared at our fingers. "Daniel? Are you happy?" He looked down at me. "Yes." The answer came immediately. That made me smile. "Good." He squeezed my hand. "Are you?" I looked at him. For the first time in a long time. His expression softened. Then he lifted my hand and kissed my knuckles. Something about that tiny gesture made my chest ache. I leaned closer. He kissed my forehead. Then my cheek. And when our eyes met, he whispered, "I love you." I smiled. "I love you too." For a while it felt like nothing could touch us. Then reality arrived. My father called me one evening while I was at Daniel's. I stared at my phone. Daniel looked at me. "Answer it." I nodded. "Hey Dad. Where are you?" I looked at Daniel. "Out." "With who?" I hesitated. "A friend." There was silence. "What friend?" I swallowed. "Daniel." Another silence. Then my father's voice changed. "You're with Daniel?" "Yes." "Why?" I didn't know what to say. "Dad. Nova, we've known each other for years. You can tell me the truth." My heart began pounding. I am telling you the truth. But I wasn't. Not completely. And somehow that made me feel worse. We ended the call a few minutes later. I put my phone down. Daniel was watching me. "He knows something." "I don't think so." "He's your father." I sighed. "I hate lying to him." Daniel looked away. "So do I." I stood. "Then maybe we should tell him." Daniel's face tightened. "Not yet." "Why?" "Because once we tell him, we can't take it back." "I'm not asking to take it back." "I know." He walked toward me. "But I want to make sure you're ready." I looked into his eyes. "I am." He touched my cheek. "I've spent years being careful with you." "I know." "I don't want our relationship to become something you regret because everyone around you makes you feel guilty." I shook my head. "I won't regret loving you." He smiled sadly. "You say that now. I'll say it tomorrow too." He pulled me closer. "I hope so." I kissed him. For a moment, the world disappeared. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. The following week, my father came to Daniel's house unexpectedly. I was there. We had been having coffee in the kitchen. The front door opened. Daniel froze. I turned. My father stood in the doorway. He looked at me. Then at Daniel. Then at the distance between us. His expression changed. He didn't say anything. Neither did we. Then his eyes dropped to Daniel's hand. He had been holding mine only seconds earlier. My father looked back at me. "Nova." My throat went dry. "Dad." He stared at Daniel. "What is this?" Daniel stepped forward. "Let me explain." My father raised his hand. "No." His voice was shaking. "I don't want you to explain." He looked at me again. Then his eyes filled with disbelief. "Is this what I think it is?" I couldn't lie anymore. "Yes." The silence that followed was unbearable. My father looked at Daniel like the man standing in front of him was suddenly a stranger. "You're my best friend." Daniel swallowed. "I know. And he's my son." "I know." My father shook his head. "I trusted you." Daniel's expression broke. "I never wanted to hurt you. But you did." I stood between them. "Dad, this isn't something he forced on me." I didn't say he forced you. My father looked at me. Then what am I supposed to think? I took a breath. You're supposed to understand that I love him. The room went silent. Daniel closed his eyes. My father looked away. Then he said the words I had been terrified to hear. You need to end this. I looked at Daniel. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He simply looked at me with tears in his eyes. And somehow that hurt more than my father's anger. Because I knew what he was about to do. He was going to let me go. Not because he stopped loving me, but because he loved me enough to sacrifice himself. And I wasn't sure my heart could survive that. For the first time since I had known him, Daniel didn't look strong. He stood in the kitchen with his hands at his sides, staring at my father. My father looked furious, but Daniel looked heartbroken. And somehow that hurt more. Nova, my father said again. I need you to leave. I didn't move. I looked at Daniel. He finally met my eyes. There were so many things in that look. Apology, fear, love, and goodbye. I shook my head. No. My father frowned. What? I said no. Nova, this isn't something you can just. I know exactly what I'm doing. You're 25. I know. He's 14 years older than you. I know. He's my best friend. I swallowed. I know that too. My father's voice became sharper. You don't understand what this means. I stepped forward. No, Dad. I think you don't understand what it means. Silence. I looked at Daniel. He didn't make me fall in love with him. My father stared at me. I did that myself. Daniel's eyes closed for a moment. I continued. He never pressured me. He never asked me to choose him. He actually spent more time trying to push me away than anything else. My father's expression changed slightly. You expect me to believe that? Yes. After all these years? Daniel finally spoke. I never intended for this to happen. My father turned toward him. But it did. Daniel nodded. And I take responsibility for that. Responsibility? My father's laugh was bitter. You were supposed to protect him. Daniel looked down. I tried. You failed. I know. The room went quiet again. My father looked at me. Then he said something that broke my heart. If you stay with him, you lose me. I froze. Daniel immediately looked at my father. Don't do that. My father turned toward him. You don't get to tell me what to do. This is between you and me. No, my father replied. It stopped being between us the moment you became involved with my son. I looked at Daniel. He was trembling slightly. Then he turned to me. Nova. I shook my head. Don't. Please. Don't say goodbye. His eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He walked toward me. My father stepped back. Daniel stopped in front of me. His voice was barely audible. I love you. My chest tightened. Then stay. Daniel closed his eyes. I can't. Why? Because I won't be the reason you lose your father. You don't get to decide that. I know. Then let me choose. He looked at me. For a second I thought he might. But then he shook his head. I love you enough to let you go. The words destroyed me. I turned away because I didn't want either of them to see me cry. But I couldn't stop it. I walked outside. The rain had started again. Not the violent storm from that first night. Just a light drizzle. I stood on the porch and stared at the street. A moment later Daniel came outside. He stopped several feet away. Neither of us spoke. Finally I said, Do you really think this is what I want? No. Then why are you doing it? Because I know what your father means to you. He means a lot to me. I know. And so do you. Daniel's face crumpled. I know. I wiped my eyes. Then why am I the one who has to lose someone? You shouldn't have to. Then don't make me. He took a step closer. I could see the tears in his eyes now. I wish I could make this simple. So do I. I wish I could tell you everything is going to be okay. But you can't. No. He looked down. I can't. I moved closer. Then tell me one thing. He raised his eyes. Do you regret loving me? His answer came immediately. Never. I closed my eyes. Neither do I. For a few seconds we stood there in the rain. Then Daniel reached for my hand. His fingers wrapped around mine. He held it like it was the last time. Maybe it was. I'll always love you, he whispered. My throat tightened. Don't say that like it's goodbye. He looked at me. Maybe it isn't. Hope flickered inside me. Then he released my hand. and walked back inside. I stood there alone. The rain fell harder. I watched the door close behind him. And for the first time I understood what heartbreak really felt like. It wasn't losing someone you had stopped loving. It was losing someone you still loved more than anything. I went home that night. My father barely spoke to me. I went into my room and shut the door. For days I tried to convince myself Daniel had done the right thing. I told myself it was temporary, that eventually I'd feel better. I didn't. Every morning I reached for my phone expecting his message. Nothing. Every night I stared at his name in my contacts. I wanted to call. I didn't. I wanted to drive to his house. I didn't. I wanted to tell him I didn't care what anyone thought. But somehow I knew Daniel would only tell me to stay away. 1 week passed. Then 2. I went through my normal routine. Work, home, sleep, repeat. But I felt like a ghost inside my own life. One evening I opened the drawer beside my bed and found the shirt Daniel had given me that first night. I held it against my chest. I could still remember his house. The rain. The coffee. The hallway. His arms around me. His whisper. I can't stop myself anymore. I closed my eyes. And suddenly I realized something. Daniel had spent years believing he was protecting me by deciding what was best for me. But he had never asked what I wanted. And I had spent 2 weeks doing exactly the same thing. I had let fear make my decision for me. That night I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking. I opened Daniel's contact. I stared at his name for several seconds. Then I typed, "I'm coming over." I almost deleted it. Instead I pressed send. The message showed as delivered. A minute passed. Then 2. No reply. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys. Because I'd finally understood something. I could lose my father temporarily. I could survive his anger. I could survive people judging me. But I couldn't spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd fought for the man I loved. I drove through the night. Toward Daniel. Toward the house where everything had started. And this time, I wasn't going there to say goodbye. I drove through the night without knowing what I was going to say when I reached Daniel's house. I only knew one thing. I couldn't stay away from him. The road was nearly empty. Streetlights passed over my windshield one after another, and with every mile, my heart beat faster. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen him. The porch. The rain. His hand holding mine. The way he'd said, "I love you enough to let you go." I had spent 2 weeks trying to accept those words. I couldn't. When I finally turned onto Daniel Street, every light in his house was off except one. The porch light. I parked outside. For several seconds I just sat there. Then I got out. My hands were cold. I walked toward the door and knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. I tried the handle. Unlocked. "Daniel?" No answer. I stepped inside. The house was quiet. Exactly as I remembered it. The same furniture. The same bookshelves. The same lamp beside the couch. And suddenly memories came rushing back. Our first dinner. The coffee. The storm. His arms around me. I walked farther inside. "Daniel?" I heard movement upstairs. Then footsteps. He appeared at the top of the stairs. The moment he saw me, he stopped. His face went completely still. "Nova?" I nodded. "What are you doing here?" I swallowed. "I told you." "What?" "I wasn't coming to say goodbye." Daniel came down the stairs slowly. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." "You need to go home." "No." He stopped in front of me. "Nova, I need you to listen to me." He looked away. "I already know what you're going to say." "No, you don't. You're upset." "I'm not." "You're angry with your father." "I'm not here because of my father." "Then why?" I looked directly into his eyes. "Because of you." He didn't speak. I took a breath. "I tried." His face changed. "I tried to forget you." I continued. "I tried to convince myself this was just a mistake." He looked down. "But it wasn't." His voice was quiet. "You don't know what you're asking me to do." "Yes, I do." "No, you don't." He finally looked at me. "You're asking me to risk destroying my relationship with your father." "I know." "You're asking me to risk hurting you." "I know." "You're asking me to believe that one day you won't wake up and regret choosing me." I stepped closer. "And you're asking me to live without you." He went silent. I shook my head. "I can't do that." His eyes filled with tears. "Nova?" "No." I reached for his hand. He let me. "I don't want you to protect me from my own choices." His fingers closed around mine. "You're sure?" "Yes." "Even now?" "Yes." Even if your father never accepts us? My voice trembled. Yes. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he whispered, I'm scared. I smiled through the tears in my eyes. So am I. He laughed softly. For the first time in weeks, I saw the man I knew again. Not Daniel the protector. Not Daniel the man who thought he had to sacrifice everything. Just Daniel. The man I loved. He stepped closer. His hand came up to my cheek. I missed you. The words were barely audible. I closed my eyes. I missed you too. He pulled me into his arms. I held him tightly. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then he whispered, I thought I was doing the right thing. You were trying to. I didn't know how to love you without hurting you. I pulled back enough to look at him. You don't have to know everything. He smiled sadly. That doesn't sound like you. Maybe you've changed me. Maybe. I looked into his eyes. Daniel? Yes. I chose you. His expression softened. And I choose you. Then he kissed me. There was no fear in it this time. No hesitation. No wondering whether we were making a mistake. It was simply the kiss of two people who had finally stopped running. When we pulled apart, Daniel rested his forehead against mine. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. Neither do I. Your father may never forgive me. Maybe. We may have a difficult road ahead. I know. He smiled. But you're still here. I smiled back. I'm still here. He wrapped his arms around me again. And standing there, in the same house where our story had started, I realized something. Love wasn't supposed to be perfect. It wasn't supposed to be easy. Sometimes love was simply choosing someone when fear gave you every reason to walk away. And I had made my choice. A few weeks later. Things didn't magically become easier. My father still refused to speak to Daniel. He barely spoke to me either. But something had changed. I had stopped hiding. I stopped pretending that my relationship was something shameful. Daniel and I didn't make reckless promises. We didn't pretend everything would be fixed overnight. We simply stayed together. We talked. We listened. We gave each other time. And slowly my father began to soften. Not because anyone forced him. Because he eventually saw what I had seen from the beginning. Daniel made me happy. One evening my father called me. I answered cautiously. Hello. There was silence on the other end. Then he asked, Are you happy? I swallowed. Yes. Another pause. Does he treat you well? I smiled. He does. My father's voice softened. I don't understand it yet. I know. But I'm trying. Tears filled my eyes. That's enough for now. After we hung up, I called Daniel. He answered immediately. Everything okay? I smiled. Yeah. What happened? My father is trying. Daniel went quiet. Then he said, So are we. I looked out the window. For the first time in a long time, tomorrow didn't scare me. Because whatever happened next, I knew who I wanted beside me. 6 months later, I stood in Daniel's kitchen and listened to the rain. It wasn't a storm this time. Just a gentle rhythm against the windows. Steady. Peaceful. Almost familiar. I smiled to myself. Daniel was standing beside the stove, trying to cook dinner while pretending he wasn't constantly checking the clock. You're burning it, I said. He looked over his shoulder. I'm not. You are. I've got it under control. I walked closer. Smoke was already rising from the pan. I laughed. You definitely don't. He turned off the stove. Fine. Then he looked at me. And what would you have done? Not burned it. Very helpful. I smiled and stepped beside him. He wrapped an arm around my waist. Hi. Hi. Good day? Better now. He kissed my forehead. I leaned against him. There had been a time when even touching him had terrified me. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Our relationship hadn't become perfect. It had become real. My father still needed time. Daniel still carried guilt he sometimes struggled to put down. And I still occasionally worried that everything could disappear. But we were together. Openly. Honestly. And that was enough. That evening after dinner, I walked toward the same hallway where everything had changed. I stopped beside the window. Daniel noticed. What are you doing? Remembering. He came toward me. Again? I smiled. This place has a lot of memories. He stood beside me. I remember that night. So do I. You were standing right here. With my back to you. He nodded. And I was terrified. I turned toward him. You didn't look terrified. I was. You held me anyway. His expression softened. I had spent years trying not to. I smiled. And failed. Completely. I laughed. Then I became quiet. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if my car hadn't broken down? Daniel thought about it. Every now and then. What do you think? He looked toward the window. I think I'd have eventually told you. Really? Maybe. When? He smiled. When I was 90. I laughed. You're ridiculous. Probably. He turned toward me. But I know one thing. What? That night changed my life. I looked at him. Mine too. He reached for my hand. Our fingers intertwined. For a few seconds we simply stood there. Then I asked the question I'd been carrying for months. Are you happy? Daniel didn't hesitate this time. Yes. I smiled. Completely? He squeezed my hand. Completely. I leaned my head against his shoulder. Outside the rain continued. The same sound. The same house. The same hallway. But everything was different. I remembered that first night when I'd stood there alone, unaware that my life was about to change. I had been afraid of what Daniel felt. Afraid of what I felt. Afraid of my father's reaction. Afraid of the future. But love had never asked me to stop being afraid. It had only asked me to be honest. Daniel looked down at me. What are you thinking? I smiled. That this is where I almost ran away. He frowned. From me? From everything. He nodded. I remember. I thought loving you would ruin my life. His expression became serious. And now? I looked into his eyes. Now I think loving you is the most honest thing I've ever done. His eyes softened. He lifted my hand and kissed it. Then he pulled me closer. I rested my head against his chest. His heartbeat was calm. Steady. Safe. Just like that first night, I could feel his arms around me. But there was no fear now. No hesitation. No reason to let go. He whispered, You know what I wanted to tell you that night? I looked up. What? He smiled. I wanted to tell you that I loved you. My heart skipped. But you didn't. I was afraid. You're not afraid now? He shook his head. No. Why? Because you're here. I smiled. Then I wrapped my arms around him. I am. He kissed my forehead. You're not going anywhere? Not unless you burn dinner again. He laughed. I can live with that. We stayed there for a while, listening to the rain, listening to each other's breathing. And I thought about how strange life was. One argument with my father. One broken down car. One phone call in the middle of a storm. One night at the house of the man I was never supposed to love. That was all it took. One night to change everything. I used to think love arrived with certainty. With perfect timing. With no complications. I was wrong. Sometimes love arrives when you're exhausted. Sometimes it finds you in the middle of a storm. Sometimes it's standing behind you when you don't even realize you're being watched. And sometimes the person you were never supposed to fall for becomes the person who finally feels like home. Daniel looked at me. Nova? Yeah. I love you. I smiled. I love you too. He pulled me closer. And this time, when the rain fell outside and the night grew quiet around us, I wasn't thinking about what could go wrong. I wasn't thinking about tomorrow. I wasn't thinking about what anyone else might say. I was simply thinking about how lucky I was that one terrible night on a dark road had brought me to the one place I had never known I was searching for. His arms. His home. His heart. And the man who had once been my father's best friend had become the man I chose to spend my life with. The end.